she was dismissed for being polite to you. Made a grave error. Lily, a compassionate waitress in a tiny town cafe, stood up for a motorcyclist who was unjustly evaluated by the clients as a troublemaker, instead of receiving recognition. Despite her kindness, her supervisor fired her. Wasn't overlooked, and half an hour later the biker returns and departs with his crew, a series of actions that will alter the ways Lily's life has never. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Revealed Stories. I have another touching tale to share today. Let you know that Lily had been employed at the cafe for years, selecting its coziness and familiarity over larger. For her, there were more opportunities here. More than just a job. It was a home away from home. She belongs in the regulars space. Called her by name and was aware of their orders at 1 before they even asked. An old man had trouble lifting the table. Lily, his cup and hands are wobbly due to age, stopped and steadied his hold gently as he brought the coffee to his mouth, allowing him to, "Let me assist you," the elderly man offered quietly. He laughed, his eyes glimmering with, "Thank you so much, my love." "Always." Lily grinned, watching out for us elderly people. Someone must playfully taunt her. Wink before continuing with behaviors such as these were instinctive to her little actions. That won her the affection of the regulars. What kept her here wasn't the salary, but did the people have a feeling of belonging? Her co-workers frequently made jokes about her, was more concerned with the clients than the proprietor of the cafe made a sentiment that wasn't distant from the truth. The storm raged on rain outside. Striking the windows with an unceasing rhythm, the constant drumming filled the silences in between talks. Lily's eyes strayed to the street. Inspired by a shadow that passes through the rain, a motorcycle came out of the downpour, with its headlights piercing the bike rolled to a slow stop in the misty air. Rider is a shadowy figure near the curb. In opposition to the storm, the door opened, and for a few period, every discussion when the cafe halted, the biker entered. His leather was soaked with rainwater, jacket collecting on the ground. His rough appearance attracted notice right away. Tattoos that run thickly down his arms, a wrinkled face with boots, and a beard covered in mud. The rider continued without saying anything. Rainwater seeping inside his jacket and accumulating on the ground. His looked around the room, but he kept his head down. Low, as though attempting to squirm beneath his boots became floppy under the weight of the stairs. Thuds against the wood floor when he approached parents at a table in the corner. Naturally, drew their kids in closer. Their exhausted looks betraying a man in a suit moved uneasily. His eyes were uncomfortable in his chair, sprinting in the direction of the biker before swiftly. A quiet tension was resolved by turning away. The type that spoke louder over the room. Compared to words, it was evident what everyone believed that they viewed him as problematic. Someone who wasn't part of their peaceful. As expected, Cafe Lily observed the scene, reveal her heart from behind the counter. Lowering the burden of criticism in the space felt nearly real, and she could see how the biker's misery is imprinted on face as he moved stealthily to his shoulders were in the farthest corner. Stooped, and his wet jacket left a little puddle on the ground following a moment's hesitation. Lily inhaled deeply, resolved to. She reached for a towel to relieve the tension. From behind the counter and came up to she smiled warmly and offered him table. The towel in his direction. "Hello there," she said. "It's getting a little harsh outside, huh?" The biker's expression softened as he looked up. "Yes," in her gentle tone, "I only needed to get taking a brief break from the storm to warm up. Sure. Is there anything I can get you to eat?" Lily invited her to drink, and she smiled steadfastly. paused for a second, simply to get some coffee, stated, followed by a touch of, "I was so embarrassed that I put my wallet in my other jacket. Didn't even know until I received." Lily witnessed the humiliation in his gaze and the manner in which he did not approach her glance. She was able to detect his emotions. Not only the annoyance of forgetting his pocketbook, but furthermore, the weight of the steps that are judgmental from the other, "Don't worry about it, customers," she said. "Kindly, I'll pay for the coffee. And how about a sandwich that you appear to be in need of?" The biker shook his head at something warm. "I don't want to, since that's too giving." Lily responded, "It's no bother." A comforting grin. "Stay there. I'll return in a moment." Lily strolled back to her tip jar was opened by the counter and took out some dollar bills that she poured a fresh drink and ordered a sandwich. Coffee cup that balances the coffee. She brought the warm cup gently. Gently putting it down, she said "It will take a few minutes to hang the sandwich." Snug while she awaited the sandwiches. A middle-aged man is seated there, so be ready, leaning back in his recliner with his family. His voice could be heard clearly. Throughout the cafe, his voice was filled with, "The biker gangs appear to be treated with contempt. Isn't it awful enough that they are making their rounds? A few towns over, they are destroying bars." His remark caused some uneasy giggles and stares from adjacent tables. The environment became more tense, as though everyone was holding their breath. The motorcyclist who had been silent. He froze for a time while drinking his coffee. His eyes briefly shifted to the man. Swiftly to the ground, his shoulders tensed, putting the mug down. His eyes flashed cautiously toward the leave, a small yet telling gesture that Lily realized right away that she had been keeping a careful eye on him, not out of worry but suspicion. There was in the manner he carried himself as a man accustomed to being scrutinized for carrying the burden of 1,000 incorrect assuming that he hadn't spoken since entering, but he appeared prepared already. Lily didn't think twice about leaving, retreated in the direction of the family table. Her face was composed, although, "Please pardon me," she murmured in a tone that kind but tough. "He's only here to warn and eat something. That's all occurred in a different town without the man arched. Everything to do with him, a little forward-leaning eyebrow at you." I'm not aware that he made a subtle gesture. People who are similar to the biker don't simply drop over for coffee. You ought to be mindful of someone you are so willing to defend. Lily remained steadfast, her voice steady as, "I know he hasn't caused any," she said. "Difficulty ever since he entered. He was sitting there, taking care of himself. Isn't that sufficient?" The man was surprised, as though he didn't anticipate her pushing back. His wife whispered as she put a hand on his arm. He allowed her to say something under her breath, huffing and reclined in his chair, shaking his head dismissively as Lily looked away when she saw the motorcyclist. He shifted in his chair, his gaze now focused. He stood his chair on the escape door, lightly scuffing the floor, and took hold of his jacket and approached him, rapidly catching up to him before he could depart. "Hey," she whispered softly and kindly, "but evident that you don't need to leave. It's still." The motorcyclist hesitated as it poured outside. Something flickered in his eyes, between thankfulness and "I don't want to create any more discomfort." "Difficulty," he murmured softly in a gruff voice. "However, you're not being cruel." Lily reassured him that people could remark. What they desire does not define them. "Yes," she smiled warmly at him in the hopes that to relieve his pain, before returning toward the counter, the employees looked at each other doubtfully, but refused to more whispers. Fading into the background, Lily's gaze shifted to returning to her work, with her head still pondering the discussion she had heard. But before she could process it additionally, the gentle chiming of the new arrival was indicated by the doorbell, and, instinctively, heads turned to face the entry. Mr. Carver, owner of the cafe, entered, wiping the wetness from his umbrella, a man who was in his late 50s. Consistently well-groomed in a fitted vest and shiny shoes radiating a sense of authority. His keen eyes looked over the cafe without being concerned about the environment. But for the bottom line too, for him, ensuring client satisfaction wasn't about, it was about connection or kindness, maintaining a stable business and strong profitability. His eyes swept the area as he entered. The typical room with practiced efficiency. Instead of the hum of conversation, there was his presence usually results in a charged quiet. Warm grins and salutations from the regulars today, but the well-known uncomfortable shadows were cast across faces. Quiet strain takes the place of the customary joy. Lily, who was behind the counter, saw her eyes moved across the room as well, and she noticed a specific client. One of the men she knew from earlier in the he had been clearly irritated that day when she defended the motorcyclist following the man's scathing remark regarding fake Axe presence. He now stood close to the entrance, with his relatives pointing to the in contrast. His body language conveyed frustration when he had a quick conversation with Carver. But Lily was unable to hear the precise words, but the frequent looks he tossed her in the direction of the biker sitting in a secluded place created. It is clear what the topic of his Lily's stomach sunk as she complained. Observed him shake his head in dissatisfaction, his gestures becoming sharper. Prior to turning and guiding, his Lily looked at the family leaving the cafe. The other clients in the room averted her eyes, and their clumsy shuffle and whispers that betray a few people exchanged uncomfortable glances, seemed uncertain about how to respond to the verdict that has hung in the air as it now appeared that the biker had arrived. It was aimed at her as well. Evident to Carver, the typically hospitable, the bustling cafe had evolved into a location of customers who weren't happy, weren't just uncomfortable. His eyes showed that they were unhappy, shifted between Lily and the biker. Prior to his approaching the counter, his mouth tightened in rage. Lily, His tone was abrasive and purposeful. Lily turned to face him, needing to speak immediately. Her stance is neutral, yet her expression is, "So is there a problem, Mr. Carver?" he snapped. "Pretend you don't see it." Pointing to the door where a man was and his family had recently departed, which was a frequent and devoted client. And now he's gone, you understand why, as a result of which he jerked his chin in the direction of the motorcyclist. That kind of corner person doesn't belong. Lily's eyes darkened now, yet her voice stayed calm, sir. He hasn't done. He's merely eating his food. Is there something wrong? The same as everyone else. I will not toss anyone out merely due to their appearance. Carver, Lily, it's not about his appearance. Business-wise, they make my clients uneasy, and when clients abandon my money, that's more important than your tiny Lily's hands curled into a moral stand. You want me to put my fists at her sides? Get rid of him so you may keep your profits. Carver's gaze narrowed. Safe, I want you. Here are my cafe's rules so you can do your work. You are free to look elsewhere if you don't like it. Lily took a short breath at the entrance, but that's not. Yes, Mr. Carver, this goes beyond Carver. Everything revolves on money. You believe kindness pays when you cut someone cold. The bills you believe a kind grin puts. He leaned gently in to look at the food on the table. The planet doesn't run, he said, dropping his voice. It is powered by good intentions, Lily, profit, and reputation. You're either astute enough to stay awake, or you'll be left behind." Lily's stomach was twisted behind her. Carver was always known to be brutal when it arrived at work, but after hearing it, clearly left her unable to speak. Carver. He sighed as he barely adjusted his sleeves. "You're a waste of my time, Lily. When you're dismissed, complete your shift." Lily froze when you left her your check, mouth expanding a little as though in disagreement, but she looked around without saying anything. Disappointed, the cafe confronts the uncomfortable employees and, at last, the biker, who was now observing the conversation with the Carver's intensely concentrated gaze, has already turned, concluded the discussion. But before he could take a step, the cyclist resisted. His actions when standing and in his chair were hold his deep voice slowly and deliberately. Broke the quiet as he stepped forward, his boots' weight against every stride feels heavier because of the tile. His gaze remained fixed on Carver, and you're firing her his tone, unyielding. Was quiet, yet something underneath. It's a controlled but risky thing. Carver, for demonstrating basic civility, folded his arms in an attempt to look untouched. "This is not your concern." A tense smile curved the biker's lips. However, it didn't make it to his eyes, but it will. He turned to Lily and said, Don't worry. Your generosity won't go unappreciated. Some debts are paid off in ways that aren't feasible. Imagine taking a final, incisive look at the biker. Carver moved aside and went, the sound of the door shutting. There was an uncomfortable hush behind him. The only sound in the cafe is the clinking of cups and whispered discussions. Carver. Despite his calm demeanor, he couldn't dispel the sensation he had just made. Lily swallowed deeply after making a grave error. Tangled mixture of swirling optimism and fear. She didn't know what was inside of her. Whatever was ahead, one thing was for sure. Her generosity had not gone unappreciated. Remained still for a time, her eyes drifting in the direction of the cafe's entrance. She had poured her heart into her second home. Felt nearly alien to every shift now. Suffocating as she attempted to concentrate, enduring the final hour. But the seconds dragged 30 minutes by in a haze of agitated motions, while cleaning counters, taking orders, and having a quick, silent exchange. Looks with coworkers, the consequences of her termination persisted, making each task seem more difficult. As opposed to prior to that, she was getting ready to travel to the rear office to get her salary. In a low rumble disrupted the cafe's silence, with its sound intensifying, as though something, or, at first, Lily, someone was approaching. Dismissed it as being simply normal traffic, thundering along the main street, but shortly, the noise grew louder and more intense, more constant, almost pulse-like in rhythm, gently reverberating through the walls of her senses, intensified when she paused in the cafe and moved in the direction of the front of the, wondering what it was. One, by the building, a single motorcycle roared into the heavy rumble of their parking lot engines that are getting louder over time. Riders wearing denim and leather jackets. Their heavy helmets obscured their faces. Sunglasses and came out of the fog of noise. The lot was soon half empty, surpassed by an increasing number of motorcycle scores, then dozens, and ultimately more than hundreds of people waiting in line with the military. When each bike arrived, Precision sent electricity rippling through the atmosphere, their engines roaring in time with the music. The circle beneath Lily's feet vibrates, the clink of chains from a distance, and the faint rustle of leather pierced the silence. Their harsh stares and relentlessly looked around the room as they moved in a commanding manner. Although this wasn't only a stopover, something was going to change in the atmosphere's composition. Conversations abruptly stopped, and customers froze in mid-eye bites. attracted to the scene that was being played out. A woman outside the window grabbed saying something about her coat. Leaving young before things worsened, a couple glanced at their bill and paid it quickly. Uneasy as they approached the door behind the counter, Lily's colleagues talked. Barista Josh's wide-eyed looks leaned. His voice wavered in her direction with a mixture of accusation and terror. "What did you?" he said in a barely audible murmur. "Do, Lily." The rumble of engines in the distance, Lily didn't answer. Her gaze was focused on the frontrunner, who'd gotten off the bike and was approaching the cafe's entrance, when with a tinkle, the door opened, and she recognized him right away. It was the same motorcyclist she had previously protected. As soon as he entered, the place became quiet. The sound of his boots hitting the tiled floor, his presence demanded notice. However, there was no threat in his merely a calm expression. Lily firmly grasped the strap of her luggage, firmly, as he went up to the counter as he came to a halt before her. When he took off his helmet, a tight but serious expression, I didn't have a chance. In order to introduce himself, he said I hear a deep voice in the calm cafe. Lily, the commander of this crew, Marcus, nodded. "I'm Lily, and I'm attempting to stabilize her voice," Marcus said with a little smile. "I know I owe you a much, Lily. You defended me when no one else did. Otherwise, people would evaluate me based on how I glance. Yet you perceived me as someone who's uncommon and has deeper meanings than you may realize." Lily rubbed her cheeks together. "I just did what everyone should do," flushed. Marcus firmly stated, "Most individuals wouldn't have." And we remember, with such generosity, he turned to the others. Of the cafe, his voice softly rising, "Our purpose is not to cause difficulty. Instead, we're here to express our appreciation to everyone." To their surprise, the bikers started to line up and their menacing presence in the cafe become softer as they began to place orders. But rather than merely placing orders they insisted on covering the costs themselves. Everybody in the Marcus said, "Get whatever you want in the room." Speaking to the astonished clients, it's on the ambiance in the cafe started to shift clients who had been uncomfortable. Just now, I glanced at the bikers. Marcus, with interest and appreciation, turned his face back to Lily. Kind but firm. "We couldn't just observe what had transpired after you defended me. And as a result, I'm sorry you lost your job. I was the cause of your difficulties, but we're here to correct the situation before Lily could." In response, he nodded subtly to two motorcyclists approaching the door they entered, send one with a sealed envelope in it. Marcus, the other, a little set of keys, took both of them and put them on the "This is for you" counter in front of her. He spoke steadily inside that the envelope is the deed of a little eatery. Ways from here, it's prepared and fully furnished. To go, my team and I contributed to make this occurs. You will now have your own location where you set the guidelines, and nobody can deprive you of that. As Lily gazed at it, her breath caught. The keys in her hands and the envelope, I'm shaking and unsure of what to say. "This is too much for me to handle. It means more to have you all here than—" Marcus grinned and shook his head. "Lily, it's not too much. You didn't simply. You stood up for everyone, including me. People like us are constantly being judged. Moment solely due to our appearance, but you looked past that, as such things don't proceed. A woman with braided hair went overlooked." A kind, understanding smile appeared. After Marcus explained what had transpired, I agree that you deserve better. Rather than only saying thank you, therefore, regarding it, we ensured that you'll never encounter someone like the other riders. and the cafe owner. Once again nodded, their faces gentle but steadfast. Lily forcefully swallowed her words. The sound is just above a whisper, yet I don't even know any of you, and if so, why would you? For me, a burly biker is something like this. Chuckle heartily because you assisted one of Lily. You are family to us, and in Lily is the family member we look after. Blinked quickly in an attempt to contain her eyes were burning. Eyes, I'm still not comfortable with this. I didn't act as I had anticipated. Anything in exchange, I simply did what everyone ought to have done, which is Marcus explained why you deserved it. Firmly, and we don't take no for an answer. Respond, Lily, this isn't charity. From all of us, a mutter of thanks consensus spread throughout the group, and, in addition to us, another biker was added, simply giving you a coffee and leaving. We will be here as the sun sets. Require our assistance to begin. You're not alone in this. Lily exhaled. She didn't actually realize she had a sorrowful smile appeared on her face as she held the envelope close to her chest. I'm at a loss for words to express my gratitude. For me, Marcus, this is everything. Smiled. You've accomplished more than it's your turn to let others in now. Please, just make us a commitment when don't change. You're operating that cafe. The world needs more people like you. Lily nodded. Her heart swelled. Like you. With appreciation, she didn't have to express whatever else she just knew she had discovered more than simply generosity today. She had discovered family, and the bistro was humming. Of activity, as the motorcycle riders conversed with the boisterous laughter of the employees and customers, and sincere warmth permeating the space. Coffee cups and meal platters were distributed and funded by the motorcyclists, who ensured that nobody went hungry. Close to the back, standing rigidly at the door of his office, Carver's arms unfolded as he viewed the spectacle. Were C.R. Frost, but he didn't have His gaze shifted between his typical authority and the happy patrons, and the motorcyclist's jaw clenched as the truth sunk into his cafe, which he had controlled with a strict the hand felt more alive than before. Bean, and it was unrelated to him. For a minute, his eyes fell on Lily. Thank you for the applause. Respect that he has never shown her before were now flooding in from all directions. He glanced hurriedly away from strangers, changing his position as though attempting to recover some measure of authority, but no one was listening to him. As he stood, the bikers raised their voices. Let this serve as a reminder by the entrance not to sometimes. People are judged by their appearance. The people with the roughest appearances are the ones. The room fell silent with the largest hearts. As the words took a moment to sink in, then a wave of applause began to spread. Increased volume until the whole cafe was. Lily clapped and looked about in amazement. By the love and thankfulness that permeate for the first time that night, space, she believed that things were going to become better. Going to be all right. Marcus handed her a tiny nod before heading out. Let's see Lily is around, so don't worry. We'll ensure that your new location is a triumph. As the motorcyclists mounted their motorbikes and departed into the darkness, the cafe seemed brighter and lighter, as though after the weight was removed, Lily gripped the she was holding keys. Her tears were broken by a smile. She came to the realization that occasionally being kind had a way of finding its way back to you. In unexpected ways over the course of a few weeks went by, and Lily's cafe swiftly rose to cherished location in town, friendly and bursting with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and freshly baked pastries. It was all. She has previously dreamed of clients who had previously sat in Carver's cafe. now decided to hers instead. Attracted by the generosity, she put her care into every encounter, for people to see her sincere grin. Carver had written it off as irrelevant. Turned into the cornerstone of her Carver, however, observed success from afar, as his formerly prosperous business stripped him of his strict regulations, and a chilly attitude was no longer competitive. Enjoying Lily's cafe's warmth on this day by day, his regulars stopped showing up, favoring the location where they were smiled as they were introduced, and their names were recalled, as well as their feelings at one afternoon at home. The well-known rumble of motorbikes reverberated along the road. The motorcycle crew kept their word. Lily's cafe is a common destination during their rides while they crowded the area, with Marcus leaned on storytelling and humor. Smiled against the counter and informed you we would ensure that this location was a success. Lily laughed and looked about at the busy cafe where she worked was more than just a company. It was evidence that kindness, no matter how tiny, at all times returned. Additionally, as she gazed out the window, noticing Carver's intense gaze, she sensed nothing from across the street. Gratitude alone, some learning, and no bitterness. She became aware that she was teaching, "Hi, I appreciate you seeing if this story touched you. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to help spread the motivation. And before you leave, have a look. There are a lot of videos on your screen, with more touching tales that you'll enjoy it. So click immediately and say